So one of the things we like to do is we like to get really brilliant people around the table, and we like to talk about amazing advanced technologies. They couldn't make it today, so I found this group. But more importantly, we want to talk about something that's on the horizon that we're already honestly hearing a lot about, and that's Wi-Fi 7. You've heard about it already, I'm sure, because either you've walked into a big box retailer and you've seen the big giant 7 on the side of the box of something. No doubt if you are a fan of Apple, you've already heard rumors about the iPhone 16, even though the iPhone 15 is a month old. It's got to get the rumor mill started. And a lot of people are starting to wonder, well, why would I want to implement Wi-Fi 6 or Wi-Fi 6E if I don't already have it? I'll just wait for Wi-Fi 7. So we're going to talk about the promise and the reality of Wi-Fi 7. That's the topic for this next 30-minute roundtable discussion. And since I have the brightest people in the room when it comes to Wi-Fi, I'm just going to throw it out there. Are we ready for Wi-Fi 7?
I'll go first. I think we are ready, but I don't think the industry is ready. I think that regulatory, that what was the slide earlier today, we're regulatory, we have infrastructure, we have clients, and none of them are where they need to be. I think that the industry wants to be. I think the chatter is self-explanatory. Everybody wants to talk about it. Everybody's ready to talk about it. Everybody wants to go dive off on the new thing. It's just not baked. It's not even not baked. It hasn't even gone into the oven.
We just got laptops that have Wi-Fi 6E.
We did.
Why are we so ready to throw this baby out with the bathwater and start all
Because
over?
7's bigger than 6.
But it has an E after it.
Yeah.
That's better. Lee?
So one of the big things about 7 that is easy to look forward to is the same thing that's here for 6E, and that's the use of 6 gig. That's the big important story. The rest of it is just, more details and more optional maybe stuff that might pan out, might not pan out, that we'll all be talking about 4 years from now about when are they going to implement that? When are they going to make this happen? And it's just all moving too fast. The fact that it's in 6 gig, that's great.
But is
really
Wi-Fi 7 require a 6 gig radio?
No.
No.
That's,
So just Wi-Fi 7 alone doesn't give us the thing that you're talking about.
yeah, very good point. But I'm just saying the fact that it is part of it is exciting, just like 6E is exciting. So it's hard to get energized about going from 6E to 7 based on just that. But just that is really the only thing there is to me about to get excited about.
I mean, the 6 gigahertz spectrum by itself is going to be phenomenal if we can get it, right? But all the prerequisites to actually using it, standard power versus LPI versus very low power indoor, right?
Countries and
I mean,
differences.
and it's not ubiquitous around the world yet, right? So each regulatory domain and then certification is going to make a big difference on whether or not you can use it. I mean, Mike Albano did a great job with his clients.mikealbano.com for Wi-Fi channels, early on, but now the matrix, it's going to be required for 7, and whether or not your device is going to work with your infrastructure, it's insane.
Well, we can even back up and say it's not even 7. In Wi-Fi 6, client devices are LPI certified or standard power certified, and or they could be both. And if you stand up a standard power AP, but your client is only LPI certified, it won't even connect.
Yeah, it won't see it.
So we haven't fixed our current 6E problems yet, let alone talking about the new things.
Yet we've had 2 standards that are frequency locked, and they continue to vacillate back and forth. Wi-Fi 5 was locked to 6 gigahertz. Wi-Fi 6E was locked to 6 gigahertz. Why do they insist on locking a standard to a frequency, and then the next version they go, oh, let's bring 2.4 back, and I guess that's okay to use.
I have the answer for that.
There's a very simple answer.
Well, yeah, because
No, the answer is
committee.
the committee was voted on, and the Chinese delegations stuffed the ballot box.
Okay, that's fair, but I want you guys to go home and set up HomeKit and turn off 2.4 and see what happens. Surprise! Nothing works.
No, you guys are saying the same thing. It's all the Chinese device
That's not a
manufacturers that are.
requirement for Wi-Fi 6E.
That's
Wi-Fi 6E can still support a 2.4 radio.
it's not 6E.
No,
6E is mandatory, right?
But the access point that they build can have a 6E radio and a 2.4 radio.
It can also be 6 only.
It could be, yeah.
I'm speaking more to the fact that everyone complains about this, and why do we have to keep dragging this back in? And why do we have to keep making things backwards compatible? Well, if you ever accidentally plugged a network cable into a mega or gigabit only port, who would make a port that's not 10, 100, 1000?
Everybody who does N-base T, right? N-base T does not support 10 meg Ethernet connections.
Because
guess what? They're physically compatible, but the PHYs don't work.
And that's because it's such an old technology. Who the hell would ever run 802.11b? Oh, wait. Never mind that. We have this problem because one side of the equation is trying to push hardware really quickly. We'll call those the hardware is the only way we stay alive companies. And then we have the other side of the equation, which is, why are you making me buy a new device when this one's a year old anyway? We'll call those the I don't like to spend money on hardware consumers. Somewhere in the middle of that gulf is reality. Because yes, I actually had to install a Belkin draft-in access point for my old boss because he walked in and said, boy, they told me that this will cover my whole house. And I said, well, that card only works with that access point. I don't care. And a year later, I had to go tear it out because it turns out that standard changed that much. Lee?
Well, funny you should mention the word reality. We're also at the point where reality is a single access point can list price at over $3,000.
If you put all the bells and whistles on it.
And then, whatever, do all your discount magic, you're still paying over $1,000 per AP generally for flagship APs. So to think about moving as fast as the first company, the hardware to stay alive people, would like us to all go, it just doesn't scale. I think we're reaching a point where a lot of weird stuff is happening between the IEEE and the hardware vendors and all of this stuff. It just feels to me as mostly a customer, mostly an end user, but also as a part-time provider, running a small business doing this stuff. It just feels like something is going to crumble sometime under its own weight to me from all of this.
And I don't think it's just your feeling. For one of my customers, they wanted to see a chart of, they said, it feels like things are moving faster. So I built a chart, and pretty simple, between 802.11, 802.11b, A, G, how many years in between? Like 7, 10, and then the last 3 has been every other year there's a new standard. So it not only feels like it's coming faster, it actually is coming faster.
Well, and there's an ecosystem problem, right? I mean, it's not like everybody refreshes their device every year. The devices get refreshed at a completely different cycle than the APs. When I was working for a large enterprise, I mean, our plan was to refresh the access points every 3 years, the switches about every 5 years. And that worked pretty well because the client devices were refreshed about every 3 to 4. But that's not where we're at. I mean, when's the last time anybody refreshed a printer?
That was a pretty much on the edge. I've got customers who those numbers are 5 and 10.
Yeah.
The retailers, right? I mean, they swear the thing till it dies, right? As long as it works and it keeps ticking over, there's no reason to change it.
Okay.
I think we're doing a little bit of a disservice in the industry, and I think we should push back on vendors that are launching products that call it Wi-Fi 7. I think we should go back to the days of 802.11n, where we had the draft label on products, and we should call out vendors to emphasize the fact that it's not a standard, that devices may not be compatible, that we haven't resolved all these issues yet with 6 gigahertz operation, or necessarily fixed all the problems with Wi-Fi 6E, to set the expectation in consumers' minds that it may not be ready if you buy today.
Well, yeah, there's
That's totally against their whole reason for, they're in group A. They don't want to tell the world any reason why to not buy today.
Well, Mike.
yeah, I mean, there's enterprise grade APs out there right now that are Wi-Fi 7, but they may not actually match up with what the standard is in 3 years. And you've got a client refresh cycle that's faster than that. Now you got APs hung that aren't going to work right.
Well, is Wi-Fi 7 actually required by standard to have 6 gigahertz support? If I remember
No.
correctly, it's
No.
not.
It's not.
No.
And so you can have something that's Wi-Fi 7, tested or certified, but it doesn't mean that it has 6 gigahertz.
But here's the rub. We have folks running around using a trademark name, and the trademark enforcer is not enforcing how they use it. The Wi-Fi 7 is a trademark, and it is disallowed from being used because somebody owns it. Yet that's not stopping any number of people who are out there going, "Oh yeah, we got that thing, no problem at all."
I was at the Wi-Fi Alliance with Troy, Wi-Fi Alliance meeting, and they came out and said, there is no Wi-Fi 7 logo.
Yeah.
And yet there's Wi-Fi 7 logos because it's the same logo as the other one, you just changed to a number. So they haven't put one out.
Who owns the word Wi-Fi, right?
Yeah.
The Wi-Fi Alliance does, and it's largely incumbent on them to defend their intellectual property, and they're not. And frankly, it's that lack of defense, I think, that sort of puts us all in the situation we're in. So let's blame the Wi-Fi Alliance.
Well, I was actually going to pick up on the fact that Troy said 802.11n. Which one was that again? Wi-Fi -2?
No, that was Wi-Fi 4,
Wi-Fi 4.
posthumously.
But not to be confused with Wi-Fi 6R.
6R.
But you're right,
Two.
they did have a draft logo.
Yeah.
That they said, it's not out yet.
Right.
It's still in draft mode, and there was actually a logo you put on the box that had the word draft right on the logo.
But I've also seen some write-ups on the same way AC came out with Wave 1 and then the promise of Wave 2. 7 seems to talk about release 1 and more.
Well,
So
we
is that-
heard that today from Cisco with Nick, where he's like, what's going to make Wi-Fi 7 better than what we have? And he listed a bunch of different features on the slide with little asterisks on them, like probably not yet, probably later on. Like, what was the article that I referenced today that everyone's like, oh yeah, the next iPhone will be able to talk on all 3 frequencies at the same time, and it'll be so much faster. Well, except for the fact that it'll probably only talk on 2 at most, because otherwise the battery will get destroyed. And how are you going to optimize that data transfer? Because we already have problems trying to get MU-MIMO working, right? Like what kind of multipath optimizations are you really going to get? Anybody out there in the networking world knows what I'm talking about. ECMP is garbage.
But we're basically in an era where we're buying promise, buying it's going to work sometime, and we're paying a lot of money for things that may work sometime, hopefully, cross fingers.
Yeah, but that's not just in Wi-Fi, nor is it just in networking, nor is it just in technology. We're seeing that when you buy a vehicle nowadays. Oh yeah, no, we'll patch that, we'll fix that later. It's the world we live in. It's not a justification, just reality.
I also host the WLAN Pros Professional Conference, and we have in the conference people have been talking for literally 3 years about OFDMA and how difficult it is. I mean, originally it was what do you have to do to get a certain piece of hardware with a certain NIC in a certain way, and if you do everything just right, you may catch a single OFDM frame. We move from that to today. You may catch a single OFDM frame. In 3 years, we've had Wi-Fi 6 with OFDMA, and it's not baked yet. Most clients don't do it. Some of our customers just flat out turn it off because they want things to work. So the promises, I mean, you're right. We were talking about promises, but I'm going to back up and say we haven't achieved the promises of Wi-Fi 6, let alone, and we're now moving on to Wi-Fi 7.
But that's a chicken and egg problem. You're not going to see OFDMA unless you have clean spectrum. You're never going to see it even in 5 gigahertz. I think you're not going to see it until you get into 6. And I think it's a bit of a, well, we don't see this, therefore we shouldn't, blah. Except you're not going to see it. I don't know that it was ever intended to run. I mean, I think it was intended to be piloted in 5 gigahertz, but I think the long-term vision is no crystal clear spectrum, and then greenfield, everybody supporting Wi-Fi 6 and beyond, right? No backwards compatibility, no, none of that stuff.
Yeah,
I think
but they
you'll
lost
see
the
it
whole
fire like
backwards
that.
compatibility. They chose to stay backwards compatible in 6 gig. We have the same preambles. We have the same front end. We still have to transmit at 6 meg data rates. Not a lot has changed. And if you look at the actual time for a single frame to go on the network, we're only changing the data. All the rest of the time components that it takes to actually use up airtime didn't change even in 6 gig.
No, but the opportunity to have multiple clients wanting to do simultaneous transmissions is going to go up. When you have 50% of Wi-Fi 6 clients or 100% of Wi-Fi 6 clients, opportunistically you're going to have more chances to have more clients that line up that want to do.
You're saying just keep waiting, Keith. It will come.
Yeah.
Okay. I will keep waiting.
Yeah.
Well, I'd like to jump on something Keith mentioned too, which is around the promise of the promises that we haven't fulfilled in Wi-Fi 6. I feel like Wi-Fi 7 is even more of that, right? It doesn't even have, like maybe a killer, like the killer app or reason to jump to Wi-Fi 7. I don't think there is one currently. I think 6 gigahertz is not solved for yet. It has a clear use case and a need, I think, in certain areas, but in general, it has, because we can't use it outside, some of those other issues, like it has yet to be realized. And I think in most environments, that level of density is not even needed. So are we creating the hardware for the sake of creating hardware try to move things forward, and we're not seeing, the business need, the financial justifications, other things that our customers are out there looking for to jump to it. I feel like 6 is probably pretty good for not everybody, but for a lot of most of the people, most of the companies out there, most use cases.
Yeah, well, and I think consumer grade stuff is what's pushing 7 really hard. Like you can sell a new router to some gamer who wants the super fast speeds, but that's not even going to help them anyway because their bottleneck is their WAN and they've got a 150 meg circuit anyhow. But back to what Sam said about airspace, I kind of want to go back on that. I'm worried we're going to screw up 6 gigahertz because these devices are shipping at 160 megahertz wide channels by default. The consumer stuff is going to be like 320. And so it's like we're going to screw that up, and so that clean air is not even going to exist.
Flower shop and
I don't see
hospital
that.
destroying the Wi-Fi.
Yeah, I think preamble puncturing, helps that to a certain degree, right? You'll still have them, but it's not going to be quite as impactful.
Yeah.
Oh, it's going to throw a whole new wrench in, especially varying channel widths. It's going to throw a whole new wrench into how do clients roam and pick APs, especially if channel width is important.
Yep.
But yeah, I'm glad to see puncturing come in because I think that's required if you're going to start talking about 320 megahertz wide channels, right? Those semi trucks are just too big.
I don't think you're going to see as much as what you're thinking, except in like high density urban environments. Because where are residential and commercial or enterprise stacked, other than your center city areas that are, the businesses are on the ground floor, and you've got apartments up above it. Other than that, I don't think you're going to see a lot of those channel widths outside of those neighborhoods.
Yeah, and with as far as how far 6 gigahertz can actually go with the spectrum, that's remains to be seen too. But a prime example for us, our business office is right across the street from a hotel, and it's a mess because of what they're doing in hospitality is screwing it all up. So there's an issue where we see 80 megahertz channels in 5 gig just because we're from here to there. So
But at least in hotels, their usage pattern is at night and in the morning, not during the day, right?
Yeah.
So you don't have to compete for airtime during the same production time windows.
There's another thing I like to bring up, and having just looked at a lot of 6 gig traces and seen people rolling them out, one of the problems we had in 5 gig was an OBSS overlapping condition where you had high side, low sides, and that's a really nasty type of contention that causes a even worse problem than co-channel interference because it's kind of unknown. And some vendors just would always go high side, some would go low side in 5. What I see in 6 is that primary channel is all over the place. And that 20 megahertz channel is carrying all of the management frames is going to walk on top of somebody else and not really know it. That we're not sticking on our PSEs like we're supposed to. Not that you have to. It's one way to find 6 gig channels. And it felt for a while that we might be sticking to those as our primaries for a reason and moving around. But I don't know, have anyone else seen 6 gig that's not consistently on PSEs?
Well, one of the problems with PSCs is it's more of a North American benefit. Whereas if you look at the global deployment, the PSCs don't offer you benefits on all the way we carve out channels.
Oh, understood. But even internationally, we were just in Europe, And every place I saw a 6 gig, I couldn't have predicted where the 20 megahertz primary channel was. It wasn't consistently high, wasn't low, wasn't near the center. And when you go to a 160 here in the States, there's, oh yeah, it should be kind of like the second from the left. It's all over the place. And which means you will have OBSS in 6 gig, which was this greenfield that we're hoping for. And then we have this little bugaboo poking at us. So I think we haven't fixed that.
So go ahead. Troy.
One of the things that comes up that I just wanted to push back on in the statement that, hey, we need to fix what's not working in 6E. And I think Wi-Fi 7 is our opportunity to fix this, right? Some of the scheduling optimizations that need to take place at a silicon level will only get that with a hardware refresh, right? So just optimizing the scheduling brings in a lot more benefits of OFDMA, which is a core benefit of leveraging and taking advantage of 6 gigahertz. So whether or not we get all the other enhancements that come with Wi-Fi 7, I think just making that scheduling improvements as we've learned how to manage packets and different data flows from a perspective of Wi-Fi versus cellular type traffic, I think is a huge win.
You think that's because the chip manufacturers have already moved on to 7, and so they're kind of backfilling to their AP manufacturers going, we're not going to fix that old code to give you scheduling. This is where you're going to find it.
Yeah, exactly.
So it was really driven by the chipsets, not really the manufacturers coming along.
Mm-hmm.
But you still don't lose the contention on the legacy standards when remaining backward compatible. As much as we get the fancy MLO, if they do pull it off, which I'm positive we get there, the scheduling is still going to be hindered by the remaining backward compatible with the rest of the stuff. So when you schedule this cool stuff, it's going to happen after the fact, right? So I think we only really see the benefit when everything becomes 7 certified or 6E certified.
And I think that's where Stan was saying, a lot of the things we want are going to have to wait till we have the client, the client census inside 6, that they all can play nice, and all of a sudden these magic things just start working.
Because when they start with the standards, I cannot understand why they leave so much open for optional, right?
Because you're not on the Wi-Fi line.
You do know why that's the case.
It's committee at all the hell.
Yeah.
We want to get it working, right? I mean, if you can mandate,
But the people on IEEE and Wi-Fi lands don't want that. What they each want is they come to the table from their company's point of view, and they want it what they want, and they don't want them to have it. And the only way to put it in there is to put it as optional. It has to be optional. If they put it as a standard, everyone else has it, and we don't have any special sauce.
then we have nothing to talk about.
Exactly.
So going back to something that Nick from Cisco brought up earlier, what is the promise of Wi-Fi 7? What is the reason why everybody wants to buy it other than the fact that it's one number
Up
higher?
to 36 gigs of throughput at your AP, because that's realistic.
Well, actually, that brings up a good point. I didn't see any 10 gig ports on these APs that we saw today.
Nope.
You guys aren't running 10 gig interfaces on your laptop.
No, but I saw 5 gig ports on them.
Dual fiber.
Well, it's funny because my cable company hasn't invested in 400 gig Ethernet yet.
Those PHY rates are all marketing, just crap.
Oh yeah.
Well, here's the deal. Let's just say that we decide, we hit the lottery and we upgrade everything. 800 gig interfaces for uplinks on every switch. Every device gets a 10 gig uplink. The access points are clicking along at 36 gigabits of throughput. Am I going to increase the speed on all the stuff that I do 20 times?
What's the stuff that you do?
He goes to LinkedIn, watches videos.
Yeah.
No, it's not going to get any faster.
Well, and so that's just it, right? Because we're applying tomorrow's technology to today's use cases. And so there is, I think somebody over there was talking about what is the use case that's driving Wi-Fi 7, and I'm not entirely sure it's here yet. Once you start talking about low latency, AR, VR, those sort of things become really, really sensitive to latency, and then it becomes a significantly different.
But you have to build the solution. You have to build the plumbing and the platform.
No doubt.
You can build
the
applications on top of it.
No
right?
doubt. Yeah.
So I've seen.
I have a concrete example of that very thing. It was at the Wi-Fi Lamps show in Prague. They had a demonstration where you put on an AR kit, and they were running a proprietary QoS. that they could turn on and off with the switch. And it was, you have a dedicated, just you on the VR or not? And you put on the VR and you use like Beat Saber or something, and it looked normal. And then they turned off the QoS, and I like got nauseous.
Yeah.
It was that much of a difference. So I think we don't know what we don't know yet. So those AR things could be so much better. We just don't know. We've never experienced.
That's that motion to photon latency that if it exceeds something like 50 milliseconds, it's all vertigo time, right?
But throughput doesn't necessarily solve
Bingo,
that.
yeah.
So that's where you see like private LTE, CBRS come into play on the VR stuff. That's where that will take off.
But
because that,
MLO
latency is
on
a
the
question
Wi-Fi.
too. Though.
Yeah.
but and yeah, that helps with your latency because you
Yeah.
don't have contention.
Well, and as we get faster, latency just naturally drops as well.
But I've seen a study that Intel did with showing some of the experiments done with Wi-Fi 7 and this thing called TSN or time sensitive networking, the OT side, that they can hit 5 nines of sub-millisecond latency in these PLC environments and that. Pretty reliable. But the way you implement this, I'm still trying to get my head around it, but it's referred to as 802.1 QBV on top of BE. And it does look realistic, right? So there's some promise.
Hey, if you'd have told me 3 months ago that being able to replace InfiniBand with Ethernet was a real possibility, I would have told you that you were being unrealistic. And we've seen that as a possibility because it turns out that when there's a way to sell new hardware to people, they're going to find a way to make it happen. Whether it's making the physical stuff work a little bit faster so that we can do things like move massive amounts of data through AI processing, or we can sell more client adapters or new phones or whatever it happens to be. And I think that's why we find ourselves in the mess that we're in right now, is because the technology is advancing as fast as possible. But R&D alone doesn't do anything. We have to sell this to somebody in order to make it work. Anybody out there who ever owned a Betamax VCR knows exactly what I'm talking about. But we've got to keep pushing this forward. But we also have to help people understand that, just like the yearly refresh cycle for a phone now, it's going to be a slightly faster horse that eats a little bit less hay. There's not any groundbreaking things that are going to happen. Yeah, if you move from Wi-Fi 4 to Wi-Fi 7, everything is going to be different. But there's also a lot of devices that are never going to move off of Wi-Fi 4, like garage door openers and other IoT things. And you're going to have to buy new devices in order to make sure you're using all of it. Yes, Keith?
I think people who are watching this stream who didn't watch the earlier one today were from Cisco. One of the best slides I saw that Nicholas put up was a adoption curve, the standard little bell curve, and showed where Wi-Fi 6 is, and then dropped just a little dot of where Wi-Fi 7 hasn't, especially for enterprise. It's not even on the curve. We're talking about something that's not been ratified by the IEEE or the Wi-Fi Alliance, or the chip manufacturers haven't even codified it, finished product yet. So we're talking about the future. Even though you can buy a Wi-Fi, they call it a Wi-Fi 7 today, either enterprise or in Soho, they're not.
Yeah. I think in the industrial space, I think 802.11n is pretty bleeding edge, right? So the jump
Right.
from Wi-Fi 6 or 6E or 7 even, like that's way ahead of the curve in that environment. So they have a lot of catch up to do.
Right.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Sean.
I was just going to comment. Mike had mentioned, he's doing this in healthcare as well. Healthcare is the same problem, right? There's so many legacy things that the hospital holds on to for 20, 30 years, right? And then, it's hard to keep them updated and follow the regulatory process and everything to bring a lot of those devices that, we do depend on for healthcare purposes. It's onerous to bring them into current status. And so they just don't do it. The manufacturers just don't do it.
And this is where we need the help of the hacking community to completely and utterly break WPA2 Enterprise so that there is a reasonable justification for healthcare networks to get off of those standards and obviate those devices, right?
Can we get that? That's a challenge. Throw the gauntlet down. Let's make it happen.
Matthew's been doing a good job.
I mean, that's the one thing that would instill this industry to move forward, right? Because we're all talking healthcare. What did it take to get WEP off of the networks, right? It had to be completely and utterly broken in order for people to finally move away from
Off all your networks.
Well,
You have to say, is it off?
No comment on that one.
I think we're going to go ahead and wrap it here. Like we've done a good job of beating this into the ground. I think if you're watching this at home and you were thinking to yourself, I'm going to go to Best Buy and buy a Wi-Fi 7 AP, don't. Wait
wait for Wi-Fi 8.
Yeah, wait for Wi-Fi. Might as well at this point. By the time we get Wi-Fi 8 out, Wi-Fi 7 will work. But more importantly, you need to understand there's a lot of different things that are at play here. And what someone's promising you in a marketing slick is not what you're going to get. I go back to a blog post I wrote about a year and a half where everyone was complaining that the Wi-Fi in an M1 MacBook was slower than the Wi-Fi in the last Intel MacBook by 100 megabits per second in a very specific situation. And I'm like, it's because they got a better card in there. It'll work better overall. Don't read too much into the numbers until you've done your own work. And we're not even anywhere close to doing our own work right now until we have enough things out there that we can test. And I'll promise you that when those tests do come out and we do have proof that one thing works better than the other, you're probably going to see it here at Mobility Field Day.